This evening we're playing with pumpkins, right? Everybody knows what a pumpkin is. They're all downstairs. They're all over. It's Halloween. They'll be here through Thanksgiving. We're going to do a cold pumpkin soup, which is incredibly simple and quick. It can either be used before dinner or after dinner, similar to a dessert. We're going to do a hot pumpkin stew, and then we're going to do a mini no-bake type of pumpkin cheesecake with cream cheese and whipped cream pumpkin filling. And we're going to use those little graham cracker shells we have downstairs, so they're perfect for an individual size. First thing we're going to do with our pumpkin, we're going to start getting our pan hot. We're going to add butter to it. I'm using soft butter tonight because everyone knows by now what's in the fridge is what we use. We'll get that melting down. Now, I already took my pumpkin and I split it in half, okay? The reason I cut it left to right is because it fits inside of a pie pan, okay? What I'm going to do with this, I skinned it, scraped the insides, got everything out. Now, in my microwave, I have a bowl of warm water. I'm going to take this pumpkin, put it flesh side down. We're going to put it in the water about 10 minutes. And what that's going to do is it's going to soften the actual flesh from the skin. It'll help it peel a whole lot easier. If you've ever cut a whole pumpkin, it's very difficult to play with. The skin's almost impossible to get off. Hang on. By doing this with any type of pumpkin, gourd, any of your squashes, it helps soften the skin and it makes it to where you can almost, with just your fingers, break them off. It turns it that brittle, okay? Now, while that's working, we're gonna set this back out here. We're gonna get our onions, peppers, and garlic ready and into our pot. So with our onions, you wanna cut them all pretty small. It is gonna be a stew, so it's not gonna get pureed or mashed. It's just gonna be cooked and left alone. The nice thing about doing your pumpkin in the microwave like that is it softens the flesh tremendously, and by doing that, it reduces your cooking time when you're actually simmering it. If anyone's ever done soups with squash, you know, if you do them from raw, they kind of take a little while. That squash doesn't always break down as quickly as you would like it to. By putting that pumpkin in the microwave, it took it from a hard flesh to something that's very pliable and something that's really easy to work with. For our pepper, those of you who've been here before, you know, top comes off, bottom comes off, and then you run right down the veins in the inside, and you can get your whole pepper apart without losing any seeds, which makes it a whole lot easier to not have to stop and clean your cutting board off. And with our pepper, we're just going to roughly chop it up. Peppers and onions are going to go into our pot. We'll start to saute that down. What you're basically looking for is with this is for the stuff to start to change color, to go to the green to go lighter green and the onions to go clear. And you'll notice the smell will become much more apparent. We can add our garlic in as well. Never have too much garlic. Ever. Now, the one herb we're going to use in this tonight is thyme. And I don't know how many people are familiar with our herb section downstairs. They used to come in a big pack, and there was only about 5 or 6 different things you could get down there. They have gone to that smaller pack size, and they've increased the number of varieties tremendously. So it went from about 5 herbs to I think there's over a dozen down there now. And they all come in these individual packs. I think those packs are only $1 a pack now, towards the other ones were a little bit more expensive. And really, they were hard to use because that big of a quantity of herbs tends to scare a few people away. While that's cooking, we're going to play with this pumpkin. Now, all I did was take a knife and go flat across the bottom, just like honeydew, cantaloupe, any other round fruit that we're going to do. And then you can take your knife, simply peel the skin down. And you want to try and keep it as close to the skin as possible, but you'll notice the closer you get, you'll see green veins, and you want to try and remove those thoroughly. All of the bright orange is gone, or the dark orange, I'm sorry. And we get that bright orange-yellow color in the center. Now for this, chop it up any way you feel comfortable, okay? I like to go all the way around that center stem. That center stem is always going to be harder, a little bit more difficult to break down or chew. I just tend to get rid of it. It's much simpler, and you don't have to worry quite so much about it. We want to cut it in pieces so that they're going to cook and break down, but they're not going to completely disintegrate. If anybody's ever cooked with pumpkins before, they tend to be very veiny or stringy, and they are going to break down. It's just a matter of how much you want them to break down, by how thick or how small of a chop you go, and how long we boil it once it starts to simmer. Microwaving them makes it so much easier. How many folks have actually used pumpkins to cook with? Anybody? How hard was it to peel it? How many times did you promise you were never going to do it again because it was such a pain? It just makes it so much simpler. And it actually ends up being safer. When you're trying to skin a whole pumpkin or a whole squash, that skin is very, very difficult to get through, and you're more likely to, as you're trying to hold that, slip with your knife, and you're more likely to cut yourself with it. Since we're adding vegetable stock to, or vegetable base to this, we're going to have to add water to it anyway. So I'm going to take that water that I've been steaming these pumpkins in and actually use that as my liquid so we don't lose any of the flavor or the nutrients from that. While that's finishing, we're going to chop down our potatoes. Always cut them in half, make sure there's no brown. Then cut them in half again, and then cross cut them. Now again, with your potatoes, if you're going to put this in a crock pot and cook it for 10 hours, cut them a lot larger. They won't break down as much. They'll take a little longer to cook, but you'll still have potatoes when you get done. If you're doing it in a pot and you want to do it relatively quickly, the thinner you go, the faster they'll cook, the sooner you get to eat it. And then we're going to real quick chop those carrots and throw them in there too. And these little carrots, basically we're just going to roughly chop them up. You can stand there and hold every single one and go evenly across them. They're going to cook down and they're going to break down. And it's a stew, so it's kind of meant to be rough and rugged and random. Just make sure you don't cut your fingers off or leave anything whole. We're going to add this. Give that a gentle stir real quick. Pull this pumpkin out. Now, when you go to try and flip this, you're going to have to find a way to do it. But much softer, pulp is much easier. With this pot, I'm going to add a little bit of water to it, just to keep it from browning, slow it down a little bit, and to help get any of that onion and garlic flavor that started to stick to the bottom of the pan, it kind of gets that off of there. We don't want a lot of water in there yet, we just want enough to kind of work with. Now with this again, you can either take the top off or just work from it. There's a good picture. See those green veins that are in there? Okay, you didn't get to see many with the others. You want to try and make sure you get as much of that off as you can. We can start adding all this to it. Except, of course, what I'm throwing. Now, this is all vegetables. And traditionally, you would use chicken stock. However, with today's vegetarians, it's becoming more and more popular to use the vegetarian, the vegetable bases, vegetable stocks. Either will work. I don't know if you can see on camera from up top, but it's already starting to break down. It's got a good color to it. We're going to pour the rest of our water in here just to make sure nothing else is sticking to the bottom. And then we are going to add plenty more than that. I just wanted to make sure I use that liquid first, because that's where that pumpkin juice is and all of that flavor that's there. Okay, vegetable base. Everybody has beef bouillon or chicken bouillon. Downstairs we started carrying vegetable. Same as the beef and same as the chicken, it's just a vegetable stock that's been reduced and reduced and reduced to where it's just a paste or a glaze. And it's just pure vegetable flavor. You can add, I like to add this right away so that it incorporates through what you're cooking. However, you can adjust the product later if it needs a little more flavor or a little less. It's a good additive. Instead of just putting pure salt in it, you add that and it increases the vegetable flavor. I stir it all down as quickly as I can. And then we're going to add our thyme to it. And with this, packs are a little bit bigger, I'm just going to take it stems and all. The reason I'm going to do that is so that I can get them out. We're going to let it simmer for a little while, and then you can taste it. If it's becoming too intense, you pull the thyme out. If it's not quite strong enough, you can let it sit a little while longer. Now, water for this, it's going to boil and simmer because you have to get your potatoes done. But you don't want to swim your product in it. You want to make sure that it's an even ratio of water to product. You want to make sure it covers it, but it doesn't get lost in there. Stews you want to be thicker and heartier. You need just a little more. The less water you put in this, the less time you'll have to spend boiling it to try and get it to cook down, or adding things to it to try and thicken it or flavor it. Okay, I don't know if you can see on the overhead, but it's just floating. It's not really saturated, it's not really swimming. It's just enough to where you can stir it comfortably without having too much splash. There's not a whole lot of resistance on it. Now, I'm pretty sure it's a pretty bright color. It's got that real good look to it. Now, you could take this and run it through a blender and make it smooth. We're not going to do that. We're going to leave it just as thick and chunky as we can get it. But right now we need to let it simmer. Now you can see how long this has been boiling. It's been simmering. Because our pumpkin is already done, I just took out a potato, and I'm pretty sure that they're soft and ready as well. Okay? I'm going to use a spoon, and I'm going to pick out my thyme, because nobody wants to chew on a thyme stem, I'm sure. But I can smell it. And that's the nice thing about working with the whole stems. Once it gets to the point where it has enough flavor, you can pull it out. And yeah, some of it's going to fall off the stem, some of it's going to cook out. You're not going to be able to get it all out of there. But you can dramatically slow down how much flavor is getting put in there. Okay? And you can do it with any stalky herb. For instance, lots of people love rosemary until they get one time where they put way too much in. This is one of those instances where you can cook with it and you can start to work with it and learn a little bit more about it, but not have it to where it's so overpowering to where you can't stand it. Now, we did say this was a stew, and stews tend to be what? A little bit thicker than what a regular soup would be. Okay? And I don't like to add cornstarch and things like that when I'm thickening these. What do you think we're going to put in it? Canned pumpkin, because it's already, one, the flavor that we're looking for, two, already in the product that we're using. I got one more stem in here that's giving me a hard time. The regular mash canned pumpkin. Okay? They do have a completely unflavored one. This has a tiny bit of pure pumpkin. Read the ingredients on them. I chose one that's strictly pumpkin. Some will have a little bit of nutmeg or a little bit of cinnamon or something like that. This is just pure pumpkin filling. And because we're just using it to try and thicken this up slightly, and by slightly, we're not gonna have to use much because that has cooked down so much. It's already gotten quite thick. It's just gonna help with that pumpkin flavor. It's not gonna hurt anything. Now, one of the last things I'm gonna do is a little bit of pepper. And we're gonna do a tiny little bit of salt. Now with salt, when you're playing with this particular products or zucchini or squash or carrots, taste it right away. And I promise you, the first thing you're gonna taste is a watery vegetable, okay? Then start with your measuring spoons and go with 1/8 or less teaspoon of salt, okay? Add it, mix it up real well, wait a second, and then try it again. You'll be amazed at what happens. You'll go from having a watery product or something that tastes watery to something that will get slightly creamy, to something that'll get really buttery, to something that'll get really rich and creamy. Salt is a horrible word, right? It's really not. If you learn how to use it and learn how to work with it, you can make something taste the exact same way with a teaspoon of salt that you can do with a 1/2 pound of butter and a cup of cream, okay? So play with it and work with it a little bit and you'll see the difference. Still finding stems. But see how we kept that bright color? I'm not sure if you can see it on camera, but you'll definitely see it when we put it in a bowl in a minute. You could. I'm a guy, I like fishing. Right?
Okay.
It doesn't bother me to do it. Now, you can see as I tilt this, what happens. It all runs. So what I want to do is kind of try and work through that and pull from the bottom of the bowl up so that the thick comes out as well as that last string of thyme. But always go to the bottom of your pot and pull forward and you'll get the pumpkin and the potatoes and the onions and everything out first. If you just pour this over and you're not going to pour it all out at once, all you're going to get in your bowl is the liquid. Okay? So try and work with it to where you get everything out together. Make sure you don't have it leaking all over. I promise I'm not going to put whipped cream on the top of this one. You can never use too much garlic. And it's ready to serve.